Hello, fellow druids, judgmentals, people who are here to heckle me. I was warned that would happen. They're probably not here yet, but, they're going to be here. So, yeah, if you... I'm kind of vamping a little bit here at the start since I'm doing this live, but if you join in, this is sort of a bit of a grab bag episode. Might be my last one for the year. I know it's technically only the 22nd. I might record some stuff next week after Christmas, but no guarantees on that. Sorry if there's still background noise. I turned my heat off, but apparently it's still winding down, so should be quiet here in a second. Anyway, I wanted to do an episode kind of just talking about basically everything that everything that's been on my mind. Sort of a generic episode, sort of one where the length, I don't know how long this episode will be. Could be short, could be long, based on how much I like to talk. Probably long. You probably can notice there's a husky right there. Oh, can't see her head because there's coats in the way. Bummer. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know necessarily how long this will go, but I kind of just want to put some thoughts out there as far as the year has gone, how the next year might go, or just thoughts. I don't want to like pigeonhole myself into anything specific. I really hope I did make this public. I did. Okay, good. And did Twitter tweet it? Maybe. Why everything's being so slow. So yeah, that's kind of be the purpose of this episode. I'm not going to focus solely on War Machine here and Circle or Judgment. I'll probably be kind of jumping around all of them, which might be commentary enough for both this year and certainly the coming year. I would definitely say that in the coming year, I'm hoping to see both of those games remain a focus for myself. I certainly, while there's a lot of stuff coming from Privateer Press in the coming year, and I have my eye a little bit on Riot Quest because I think it's a game. Well, I don't know anything about the game, but the concept of the type of game and the length of it and so forth definitely very much appeals to myself. I've played very little bit of Shadespire. And I think it's a fun game, and I think it works really well. And so to see something of that vein from Privateer Press is very interesting to me. So that will be... that'll definitely be a thing. I'm gonna post in a bunch of places that I went live. Just because people are pretty slowly making it in. Let's just respond to myself here on Twitter. All right. Pardon me. Thought I was past all that. Anyways, yeah. So my year coming up. Yeah, Riot Quest I have an eye on. But other than that, I do expect War Machine to continue to be a game that I get some play in. Pardon me. And yeah, War Machine continues to be a game, and Judgment I would really like to see take a bigger role in this coming year, and I really think that it's you know, just to kind of start in on some discussion about Judgment. I'm really excited. I'm still waiting on a few models from them, but I think they'll probably be here sometime next week as of the time of this recording. So I'm recording this on a Saturday evening, Sunday for those folks in Aussieville. We'll go with that. And with Christmas, I know that's not a shipping holiday, but hopefully sometime next week I get those final models that I'm holding out for and get those assembled. And I'm really hoping the first like major event I have in the year is of course the ATC for War Machine, which I'm gonna play Circle at, of course. But I am really excited to start getting some Judgment games in. I'm hoping that in and around Chicago that I can get some more hype going for the game. I think right now it's certainly a very new and fresh. I mean, I've been talking about the game now for 2 years, but it's poised, like people are now getting stuff. I think a lot of people who missed out on the first Kickstarter when the second one came around, especially when they found out they would be able to get some of the original models, you know, because everybody has different things they like, that there was some ability for people to get those models that they missed, right? And really to start getting deeper and deeper into that game. I know there's probably going to be a podcast soon that Jaden and some others are going to be working on, so that's really great. And you know, out in the West Coast-ish, he's a little ways away from the coast, every game Jaden said that he's played against somebody, they've found that they've picked it up very quickly and they've been very interested in the game. The models sell themselves, frankly, in my opinion, and this game to me seems like it has all of the combination of things you want. Obviously I enjoy it. I'm biased, right? Like, I mean, you're listening to me, it's my channel. I really like Judgment, and it's honestly what's been on my mind, probably even more than War Machine right now, which is odd. I sort of had been waiting for what felt like 2 years for the CID that we got with the Tharn, and now that it's here, while I'm very excited for it and I'm very happy that it happened, I've felt like it's been I haven't had the same creative juices flowing for it. I haven't. Judgment's definitely caught a lot more of my attention lately. I know there's been, you know, we talked about on this channel, there's been some a lot of stuff from Privateer Press has happened in the past like 3 weeks, between people leaving, 2019 posts, CIDs, etc., etc. So still really love the game, and I still really love Circle, and there's still going to be more Circle from me for sure. But yeah, I've found perhaps that I now with so many good things that now my mind is kind of spinning, and I haven't been able to figure out like where to direct that. I would say, you know, being able to get in quality games also has become difficult, and honestly, War Machine's a game I've been playing for a long time, so you know, Judgment being something fresh and new obviously sticks out. In the chat here, a fella from the a different part of the West Coast area, in the Portland area, is definitely hoping to get that area started, he's telling me, which is fantastic. I really do think there's a few things that need to fall into place for Judgment to really happen, right? Like, it's, let's be honest, it's a very small game right now. It's more or less two-ish fellas from Australia who are pushing the game because they love the game, they love games, they love gamers, and they've put a ton of time and effort into this. and they're doing all the things that are right in my opinion. I mean, there's some bumps on the road, but they're focusing on what the players want. They're focusing on making sure that they are able to continue their business model basically by it self-funding, right? So like they're done doing Kickstarters. At least they've pretty adamantly stated that Kickstarter 2 is the end of Kickstarters for them, which I really respect, because I think there's a lot of companies that have abused Kickstarter in the sense that I believe it was not intended to be used, which is to say basically use it as a pre-release, pre-order service. And I get it, and I know like for board games and stuff, it's almost just like another channel of marketing, but I'm really happy to see that now we're going to see, the number of heroes we have out is actually pretty substantial. I think it's 28 now, once everybody gets their hands on Wave 2. And that means if you're somebody who can only buy in at a small scale, and I would say for that would be like 3 models, 5 models, 7 models, like kind of what you need to play in an event or play a game with your buddy. You can do that now, and you have a pretty solid amount of variety. But you also it's also at a point where you can keep investing, right? So like you can go all the way to that full, and you're going to have a lot of variety. It's a game where you can buy one more thing, and all of a sudden your variety changes quite a bit. They've released the draft format, which I've talked to them about a little bit. I think it's a little bit complex, honestly, just for as people come into the game. So I know they've taken that feedback. We'll see what they, how that evolves with time. But the game is in a really great place, and like it's just going to continue. And I've talked with my wife about this, and I've maybe talked a little bit with the guys who do the game. And I think right now there is a ton of... So there's sort of the legacy stuff. If we look at gaming, right, there's sort of the legacy stuff that's been out there, right? You've got your Games Workshop, like the juggernaut in the industry, right? 40K still absolutely outsells everybody. Age of Sigmar is actually doing really well. They've got a lot of small side games like Shadespire, Blackstone Fortress, Kill Team, Necromunda, and a few others. And then, of course, I would put Privateer Press kind of right in that level, right? War Machine is now in its 15th year, I believe. It's 2018. Yeah, 15 years for War Machine, and that game's going strong. I know it's been turbulent in the last couple of years in a lot of different ways. It's probably been perceived as more turbulent than it actually has been. But, I still think it's strong, right? Like, it's a big game in the industry. And then you sort of have everybody else. And I lump that in there because most of the other games that you hear a lot of talk about right now are, oh, hey, you only need... I'll use Guild Ball as an example, right? You only need 8 models to play this game, or like 1 box, right? And that box, $75 and you're in this game. Well... And and I know some people like the, and I'm picking on Guild Ball, but Infinity's similar, Batman's similar, something like God Tier coming out later in the year is going to be similar. Obviously Shadespire is similar, but it's a different type of game. But you've got all these games, and if you look at Kickstarter, you see a lot of other things, right? Small buy-in, low model count, small models, and by small models I mean like they're not the Judgment 50 mil models, right? And you don't have like the Colossals or anything. You've got like manageable size models basically, and that's great. And people are like, well, being able to buy into a game really cheap is good. And I'm like, well, it's good if you want to play that game. I mean, that's not to say this is going to be true for 100% of people, but being able to buy in cheaply also means that it's a low, like, there's a low mental investment there, right? If I only spend $100 getting in on something, I'll just throwing numbers out there, right? And I can play the full thing. Like, when I'm sick of it, there's some other game out there that's at that price point. It's like, oh, well, now that I'm like, well, I didn't, I played Guild Ball for a few months and whatever, but I'm not out very much money, and there's this other thing now that's available that's only like $100 to get into. well, I can do that. And then suddenly the game, maybe that's infinity or whatever. And like, so now, and these games are doing okay, right? They're not games I play, but, that focus is fine, and being able to get in on things like that is fine. And having games in that area is fine. But when people are like, well, I've talked to people and they're like, well, I don't think that Judgment's going to do well because it's too expensive to get in. And I look out there, and the person that told me this plays War Machine, and I'm thinking, like, you can get in on Judgment, base level for basically $150, $200 at most. Let's call it $200, even if I'm being, like you bought tokens and dice. Well, actually, if you just buy the starter set and one more hero, that's like $150, about $160 maybe, and that will give you dice. I believe it gives you the cardboard tokens. Like, you can play the game, and the thing about it is, you're not playing you're not playing the 5v5 game, but you're not playing a skimmed down, version of the game. Like, the 3v3 game is the game. Like, that is the game. Like, so it's amazing, right? Like, you could, most of the folks in the US that I've talked to, yeah, 200, in the chat, 200 is probably realistic. But like, is that more expensive than Guild Ball, where you can, I think, buy a team for like $75 and play? Yes, it is. Is it expensive compared to like buying into War Machine? Absolutely not. And the trump card here, pardon my pun for those Grimkin players out there, is these models are amazing. Like, people playing War Machine don't think twice if a character Jack or Beast came out that costs $50 to $60 in buying it, if unless they think it's not something they're going to ever play, right? Like, I have a Getter, like, just to use myself as an example, I have a Getterix, a Brenos. I technically have two Getterixes, but I have the new Getterix, I have the new Brenos, I have the new Megalith, and I have a Loki, right? Like, those four models, which I can't play a game with, I don't even think I can play them all on the same list. That's not enough to play War Machine. Those models are very comparable in detail to these models, and I think they all actually cost a little bit more, or they're the same or more. Like, for that much money, you're playing Judgment. It's awesome. Anyways, I'm kind of on a soapbox about that a little bit, but anyways, I really find Judgment is going to have a really great year. All of the things that the Galea brothers are doing at what Gunmeister Games technically is the name of their company. Everything's going to be great. I hope it continues to have a new year. Some of it's just availability, right? Folks aren't going to get into a game they can't get at their local game store, or that, just having them there sort of gives them reassurance. I know that they're doing fine with that in Australia. It sounds like the EU's catching up. Hopefully later this year they can get some more of that support here in North America, but I know it's going to be tough for them. My one current heckler / chatter is pointing out that the rules for Judgment are actually really easy, right? So the thing about it is that there's a lot of decisions to make every turn, but it's simple what you do, right? You get 3 actions. You choose how you use those. You get, your movement is what it is. Like, a lot of the little, like, nuanced things in War Machine that if you played, you've gotten used to, right? Like, so example, you have to have at least 3 inches to charge to get the bonus in War Machine, which is really confusing, right? So you're like, well, I didn't go far enough, so now, like, is it a charge or not a charge? How does that work? Like, I know I don't get the die, but are there other effects, and like, you learn all that stuff playing it, but it's not necessarily super intuitive. I'm just picking on one example. Judgment, if you charge, you charged, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you moved a half an inch or your full movement, it's a charge, right? A lot of stuff works like that in Judgment, and I love it. The goal is pretty straightforward as to what you're like trying to do. If you have played a MOBA, it's super like the concepts are super familiar, right? They've done a really good job adapting that. As you can tell, very, very excited. They're going to be at Adepticon, which is right in my backyard, so I'm really excited about that. They're going to be at Gen Con. I don't know if I'm probably still not going to make it to Gen Con unless I decide to do a weird like day trip and drive a ton. Don't hold your breath on that one. But this year's just looking up and up. I'm definitely hoping to do more. I finished wave 1 doing my like hero spotlights, and that's honestly mostly just you know, walking through what the heroes do, and giving a little bit of thought on it. But like honestly, I do not profess to be a fantastic Judgment player or anything like that at this point. I think I've lost my last like 6 games, so you know, take that for what it's worth. Well, everyone's a critic. Yep. So there's a comment here about how much from another viewer. As we transition to talking about War Machine, there's an argument that could be made that you only have to spend $40 to get in. Wow, just one other focus there. To get into War Machine, because you can buy a battle box and see if you like it before you continue. And I think that's great. I actually thought when those battle boxes came out, they were a great improvement for War Machine. The older one, they've always had battle boxes. They were $50 before, but the current one comes with like a little like table terrain thing you can play on. It comes with this little thing you can fold to be a wall. It's got the rules in there. It's got some guides in there. And at $40, like I said, it's a super cheap buy-in. That said, you know, so that's a small buy-in. It's going to give you a sense of if you like the mechanics of the game, especially the battle group, which is really like the focal point. It's not the full game though, and that's one of the it's a double-edged sword, right? War Machine and Judgment are not the same game. They're not intended to be the same game, right? War Machine is a game with large-ish armies. You know, it's got largest armies. It's got really deep, complex rules. You know, I think some of it's like good things or it's bad things, right? So, War Machine is probably the current like juggernaut of competitive approaches to a game like that, right? 40K, I don't play. I have not played 40K. I have not played Age of Sigmar, but I definitely hear a lot of 40K is, you know, determined a lot of the time at who won the die roll. You know, Age of Sigmar is still very much, you know, there's a lot of dice dependency in there, and it's a lot of very just loose casual play, and that's great. Those, you know, if you enjoy those things, that's fine. I don't play them. I would consider Age of Sigmar, probably not 40K, but right now I'm not interested really in either. But yeah, I don't see, you know, somebody's saying this in the chat as well. I don't see one as replacing the other, right? They're very different styles of game. I can see my like current, you know, my focus on which one I'm doing at any given time sort of ebbing and flowing, right? Like there might be a period of time where Judgment is more of a focus, and then I kind of go back to War Machine and so forth. Things like that. So I definitely don't see one as replacing the other. And I do think for the type of game that War Machine is, their intro product is as good as it basically could be, right? Like you can't give somebody a starter army of War Machine. And they've done other things to make that gap easier, right? Like the theme boxes that have come out throughout the year are great because, you know, for example, you could, let's say you want to get into Devourer's Host, you could go buy the Tanith box, and then you buy the Tharn add-on or the Tharn theme box, and you've gotten a huge jump in like the right direction, and that's great. They've done that with most of the factions, and then of course the small factions come out and they have an army box and they're limited, which is also, you know, a pro and a con. You know, a well painted large army of War Machine on the table is always going to look fantastic, especially with good terrain. But I do think that one of the you know, something. And we talked about this a little bit in my episode where I reviewed the 2019 stuff is that I think War Machine right now really, and this is where I'm sort of rambling and everything, and I don't know what my coverage exactly will look like for War Machine for next year. I hope to keep talking about some things I'm seeing in Circle and whatnot, and reviewing events I go to. But one of the things that War Machine I think is experiencing that I feel Judgment likely will not experience in the same way, which is fine, it's very hard to approach War Machine for new players right now. The game is massive. And Judgment's obviously going to continue to get bigger too, and I don't want to make this a total comparison, but right now, one of the things that I read an article, I think I talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but so if I'm repeating myself, apologies to people who've watched both. But there was an article about Magic the Gathering, actually, and about their pro level. And one pro player posted, I'll call it a rant, basically, saying that they were upset that Wizards wasn't really giving their pro tour its what it was owed, basically. And the article I read was sort of a rebuttal of that, and it talked a lot about how Wizards did do that basically up until like 2008, 2010. Focused super hard on their pro tour, and they learned that what they were doing was not actually benefiting their game. There's this theory that if there's like a top tier pro level play, that it will help you sell. It's almost like the trickle down theory of gaming, and it works better than the trickle down theory of economics, which we will not debate here, but suffice it to say, it doesn't work. In gaming, it also didn't work as much as they thought. Now, it's really good to have that out there. It's marketing. It certainly does help push those people who are like, I want to do well locally, or regionally, or I may want to strive for that level, right? And those people are going to spend money, and they're going to push a product, and then, etc. There is some use to that, but there's also just a ton of people who are like, I'm not going to a tournament to compete for $5,000. I'm not going to travel around the world to do this. I have a job. I know that job is how I make my money, but I like this game. And those people kind of got lost in the shuffle for a long time. And Wizards recognize that, and they've shifted a lot of their focus around to doing that. You see other games where a lot of the top players kind of complain about the RNG. Hearthstone's a great example. People complain about the RNG of the game, and that it would be better if it was less random and it would attract more pro players, and it would. And they pay attention to that, but not to its ultimate detriment, because they know that there are people who play the game because, look, this cool shit happened in my game. And that little side rant, is to look at War Machine, because I feel a little bit like CID has done this, and I feel like the game in general has just done this, where we've pushed and pushed and pushed to make War Machine the most competitive game out there. It's got the tightest rule set. It's got the most compelling, my opinion, approach to hobby miniature gaming from a competitive standpoint, right? Other games do come in similar, but the ones with tighter rules, or similarly tight rules, are smaller games. Like Guild Ball, I still believe is probably reasonably of a tight game. Something like Judgment's still reasonably a tight game. Obviously, things like Age of Sigmar or 40K, I don't think are. For Kings of War, actually pretty decently tight. I don't know about Infinity. I don't know about Malifaux. Let's just pretend those are. But the thing with that is that the game is so great right now. If you are somebody who really wants to push your limits in a game, and you want to get better, and you want to really like understand, like the more time you can put into War Machine, the more you will get out of War Machine. Which maybe again is why right now Judgment maybe has been more interesting to me, because I've had my mind on it more. It's new, it's fresh, and I haven't had time to like crank those games out that I think I need, that I feel like I need to for War Machine. But anyways, the point being that like the focus of War Machine has gotten so competitive that, you know, we use 2D terrain, which is way better for when you're being competitive, right? Because it's flat, you don't have to worry about model placement as much. You don't have to worry about deciding where, you know, is line of sight blocked, where is line of sight not blocked. It's easy to carry, right? I can just throw, I mean, I do it. I throw a whole pack from Muse on Minis or whoever into my bag, get there, throw it out, make sure it meets the guidelines, play my game. It's much faster, right? And that helps when you have a game where you need to dig, you know, no less than 20 and upwards maybe of 50 or 60 models out of your bag. You know, the stuff with, I would say most, maybe in other areas this isn't true, but leagues have definitely not been successful when they were in the past. You definitely see people who, you know, CID is constantly kind of tweaking models up, and they need it, right? There's a lot of models that we've talked about in Circle, we've talked about in all factions. Those models really do need that attention, because right now they're just so irrelevant that they weren't even being looked at. But now that Privateer's kind of gotten through that initial, you know, that initial period of doing that I think we need to now get those, I'm going to say middle of the road, those middle of the road players back, right? If War Machine is going to continue to be successful. And I think to do that, you know, Oblivion, the book that's coming out, I think is going to be a great tool for that type of thing. I think Riot Quest actually could be, in a weird way, a good tool for it too, since now you have another game that people can play, totally different rule set, but you've got models for it that can bring people into playing some War Machine. Infernals will be big, I think, but there's just the daunting set of rules needs to be looked at, and I think the visual draw to the game and the narrative of the game needs to be looked at. Because right now I sit down at a table, you know, for whatever reason, right? I'm just, all I'm going to do is I'm going to roll up a scenario, let's say for lack of, for whatever reason, I roll up Spread the Net, we throw the zones out, we scatter the terrain based on the rules. For doing that, I'm not necessarily saying the scatter technique, just, I mean, we'll place the terrain in various places on the table that meet the requirements, and then we play. But like, why? Like, and this has been true for Steamroller for a long time, and Steamroller is very balanced, and I think has been a really great thing for the game. And like, please don't play War Machine without scenario. But like, what is the, like, why am I there, right? Like, why is the terrain even there, right? Like, I'm supposed to put a line of sight blocking piece in the center, or near the center, generally speaking. But, okay, so let's say I put a house down of some kind, right? And then I put a forest off to the left, and there's a couple walls, and there's a hill and like a water feature. And, but like, why am I there? Like, why is my army there? Why is my opponent's army there? I have no idea. Like, what is, like, why is there a house and a forest and a couple walls? Like, what's the story with that? And the answer is there isn't one. There's none at all. Like, we don't know why. We have no reason why we're fighting. And then on top of it, like, what am I doing there? Well, like, if I stand in this circle, I get a point. And if I stand on this flag, I get a point. But, like, why? Like, what is the relevance of that flag? What is the relevance of that zone? I mean, I understand for the game what the relevance is, but like, there's no purpose, right? There's no narrative to be told. There's no, and I'm not saying that there needs to be like a novel that is written every time that two people play a game. And I'm not even saying that it needs to be to the degree, like, I don't want the scenarios to go to the like full-on narrative campaign stuff that we get for Steamroller, right? Because a lot of those aren't terribly balanced. They don't have a good end game, etc. but there's probably some middle ground that we need to get to where, and I have my theories on how we could do that. A lot of it revolves around having more rigidity around the maps that are being played, or the types of things that are on the map. And so far, when I've asked folks at Privateer Press, they have had concerns about being able to do that because they basically are concerned about forcing TOs and stores to have to buy certain terrain or own a certain amount of terrain, and there's some concerns there. In the chat here, somebody said, "Why is Scorn fighting Crix when there's 4 factions between them?" Why indeed? I think that there are reasons Scorn might fight Crix, right? Like, maybe it's a small contingent of Scorn that was sent around to investigate the Shard Isles, and they snuck through cover of, they snuck through the desert far enough to get close or whatever. Or vice versa, Crix is invading the desert, right? And because they're looking for this artifact that, there's some information they had that was there that would help the Dragonfather. But that's a narrative, right? Now we have a reason, but then, like, let's go with my latter example, right? Crix showed up in the desert. Well, the table should look like Crix showed up in a desert. You know what I mean? Like, there shouldn't be a water feature, or if there is, it should be like an oasis. If it's if it's actually the middle of the desert, right? We're not going to see like a house, right? A standard like village house isn't going to be sitting in the middle of the table. You might have like a sand cloud there, though. That would be cool. And like trenches still make sense, right? Maybe you've got like a sand dune. You could have an old wall, right? So you've got like this kind of rickety old wood fence that's maybe broke down. You could have some cactuses, and that could be like whatever, right? You could have some sandstone that are broken for your rubble. Like that would all be really cool, right? And you've got this this desert colored table. You put all this cool desert scenery on there, and then maybe your flag is actually the location of this artifact or whatever. And honestly, we've been so attuned in War Machine for doing this that scenarios are virtually symmetrical, and I say virtually because there is a first and a second, right? Somebody goes first, somebody goes second, and that in this game is sufficient enough to make it not symmetrical, in my opinion. But further than that, like, it's basically symmetrical after that. But what if it didn't have to be, right? Like, what if at the beginning of the game, when you roll to see who goes first, you get your choice of there's an attacker and defender, and if you win the roll, you can either get the first action, or you can choose to be the attacker or defender, right? We can do more balancing around that. A defender has to keep a certain part of the table from being occupied for a certain number of turns, while the aggressor is aiming to get the piece of treasure that I just met. I don't know. There's a lot of directions stuff could go. But we've kind of... I fear a bit that Privateer Press and the player base additionally are too they're too concerned right now, I think, with the state of the game to do anything that might be what do I want to say, a gamble, because they're worried about losing a large number of players by doing something very upsetting. However, I think, and this is my theory, I think without potentially considering it, they could slowly start having players kind of falling out, because people stop playing games for all sorts of reasons, right? They find a new game they like better, they get busy in their life, the folks they were playing against get busy, so that sort of knocks them out. It's just natural for people to stop playing. But if people aren't coming in as people are going out, eventually we sort of are starting to like attrition lower and lower, and that's what hurts the game. And then on top of it, you've got some other, you know, like social stuff that needs dealing with. Comment in my chat. That's why there's Company of Iron. Player 1 moves one model, player 2 moves one model. More like chess. Yeah, I think so. Company of Iron, I would say, is very comparable. There's more narrative to that. It was very comparable, or is very comparable to some of these other games we're talking about. I actually would put it in more of a similar vein to Frostgrave. I would say Necromunda, Kill Team. I would not quite put it at the level of Shadespire or God Tier. I don't really think I would want to compare it to Judgment. Batman and Batman Infinity and Malifaux probably all kind of compare a little bit with Company of Iron. I believe that Privateer is a wargaming company first and a storytelling company second. So that I'm actually going to disagree with you about. And it's nuanced, right? I hear where you're coming from. And the reason I'm going to disagree, though, is that the Iron Kingdoms have existed since before there was a war machine. The world actually began as a Dungeons & Dragons 3035 campaign setting and story modules. That's why, if you've heard of the Witchfire trilogy, that's where stuff comes from. And I did not play it, just for the record. That's where Alexia comes from. There's some other characters referenced in there, but Alexia's story is like directly tied to that. And what Privateer has actually managed to do is use, this is something a buddy of mine kind of pointed out to me now years ago, has used War Machine, the tabletop game, and Company of Iron and some of the offshoots, as a way to monetize their intellectual property and their world, right? So the Iron Kingdoms, the factions they're in, the story they're in, the history, the characters, etc., are all they all exist for a reason, right? Like they're all part of telling that story. And really, War Machine, Company of Iron, there were some brief other things in there too, have all been, they're RPG as well, actually, which I really think I personally think that it was a unfortunate miss from Privateer that they did not put proper focus into their RPG, because the year at Gen Con that they sold it, it was amazing, and it's a really good RPG in a lot of respects. It does something a lot of other RPGs don't, but they didn't capitalize on it by releasing content in a way that people who wanted to roleplay were willing to consume. Anyways, that's a tangent. I've always felt that was unfortunate. I really like their RPG system. I've never really gotten to play it much, but that said, so they're actually they have sort of switched over, right, in the last few years, so, which is why saying they're a wargaming company first and a storytelling company second has been accurate. And I'm not going to sit here and say like that Privateer Press has sold the greatest literary works in their anthology books or even in the novels that they've sold, right? That's just not the case. There's been some of the novels were quite solid. I've read a solid amount of them. I kind of stopped at a certain point. But a lot of them were good. I wouldn't say amazing, but they were good. And I would say the story, the plot and story that moved forward in the anthology books was no better than good, sometimes poor. But what it did was still gave you this world, right? And they used to sort of tie what was happening in the world to why you were seeing releases, like why is this character prominent? And now they've gone away from that, right? We don't have a ton of storytelling because No Quarter doesn't exist. They don't have anthology books anymore. They don't have faction books anymore. They have some content that trickles out on the website. Apparently this episode of my show should just be called hashtag trickle down. But so yeah, I would say like in the last most of Mark III, it has felt to me like the company has gone to being more of a wargaming company first and a storytelling company second, a bit to their detriment. I think I've seen what they're trying to do, but I think they would do it. I think it would be a lot better if they had that combination back again, right? Where there was a narrative moving, where there was a reason, even a poor reason for things to be happening. Now I feel like we have only flavor remains, and fluff is kind of not really being seen. And I think they need to get it back to where there's if you were to draw a Venn diagram and try to get it perfect, right? You need sort of like the flavor of what's going on. You need a little bit of fluff of the rest of the world to make the flavor make sense. And then those two things combine into like, what are the rules for this model? And you still sort of see that flavor rules thing happen. But I think if you got the whole picture kind of moving all at once, I think that would be better. And I think that would be better for folks who aren't looking just to be at the top level in competitiveness, right? You can compare to other games too. Like there are people who play Magic who collect things like Jace and there's somebody, Liliana Vess, right? I know somebody locally who she buys like literally every Liliana Vess thing she can find, right? And why do they do that? Well, there's a story behind that, as well as flavor, as well as rules. And that's not a perfect parallel, right? Magic doesn't parallel to everything in War Machine, but I do think that's going to need to be something that is focused on. I'm personally a little bit meh about the fact that Infernals we're being told is branded as War Machine, when pretty clearly that was a change for some reason that they have not explained, because their concept art all says Hordes on it. And I don't know if that has to do with the fact that for folks listening who may not know, last I knew, and I'm not an expert, so this could be mistaken, the way that distributors look at the products is that Hordes and War Machine actually are two different products, and War Machine always outsells Hordes, which shouldn't be any surprise. A, there's more factions, B, it's older, and C, it's even when you play Hordes, you usually tell people you play War Machine, right? So like, not surprised. So maybe the reason there is they want to brand it as War Machine because they want to sell it as War Machine, because that will help them keep their presence as a top-selling faction or game higher than it would otherwise do. 100% conjecture on my part. I don't really understand otherwise why they would be doing it. They, of course, have their reasons, and that's fine. Ultimately, from a gameplay standpoint, it's not going to make any difference anyways. So, that's fine. Anyways, we've kind of talked about a lot of War Machine here now in the direction of like what I hope they do and what I think they need to do, and sort of some concerns. But that said, like it's looking like it's going to be a year. I think the meta is going to shift very quickly again this year. I think as much as I feel like the game has moved to a place where you're better off sticking with a single faction, people aren't doing that. You can tell by the numbers, like right now, the amount of people playing things like Trolls, Signar, Minions is all very down. And then suddenly things like Legion, Protectorate, Circle have risen very quickly. Grimkin is lowering. Crucible Guard is increasing. Crix feels like it's plateaued at the moment. We'll see how that goes. Khador. Yes, on Infernals, they did point out, yes, they will not use Focus or Fury, and that's, I think, why they're being more... I think if they straight up used Fury and were a standard Hordes faction, they would have stayed Hordes. They're very unique. There's still people who play a lot of factions. My view on it with the CID is that the more you know about your faction, when there's tweaks and changes and things, and as the meta evolves, that knowing what you play more should be better. That doesn't mean I'm right, though. I think it's very interesting to see how people have shifted, and you can kind of see as the CID cycles happen. Something gets out, it's exciting, it's new, it's usually perceived as strong, regardless of if it is or not, and usually perception in this game is sufficient. I've talked about that a bit. So I think we're going to continue to see. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of fast-moving meta this year. I think coming into ATC, I think we're going to see Circle, Protectorate, Scorn, all, possibly Retribution, Crucible Guard, all very focused on. I think you're going to see a low amount of Khador, Signar, Trollbloods, Minions. Mercs is currently still pretty high up there, I would say. That's one of the factions I think could taper down for a little while. But throughout the year, I think these things are going to be all over the place. I think that things are going to move very quickly. I think the game will continue to benefit those who can get a lot of reps in and understand their matchups better. Which again is another thing for players that don't get as many games and don't focus on this stuff is hard to do. So I do think that for Circle, I think it's going to be a really interesting year. I'm not really expecting. The only thing we are expecting to still get that we don't know when exactly is the Well of Orboros, and I do think it's going to have. It's going to go into lists. Being at 10 points and doing what it did, it's going to make it into lists. I think it's going to be a really interesting piece to see how that flexibility of bringing that solo in is actually just very impactful. I think it's going to be stronger even maybe than my initial feelings, but a little of that has to do with its point cost needing to be where it is. And frankly, the fact that structures, I think, are, because of the nature of what they are, they have to be very aggressive, like aggressively good. Like the blockhouse has gone down to 10 points and still is not really seeing lists played. Now Signar is kind of in a low point in my opinion, but we're not really seeing blockhouses. I'm seeing a little bit of the church from Protectorate, and honestly, I will not be surprised if sometime this year, or let's say sometime in the next 18 months, if the Shrine to the Lawgiver drops 2 points. Because I already see people not including it in lists because of the fact that it's a structure. It can't score things. It can't move. It's very predictable. And that one's super good, and it's still like barely being played. So I think the aggressive feeling cost of the Well still puts it, as Richard in my chat is pointing out, that it's good enough to make in lists and not an auto-include. At 10 points, or 5 as people like to call it, we've talked about this before, I don't want to get into it again, it's still not going to make it in every list. And it should not make it in every list. But yes, being able to bring solos. But that's the only thing we really know that's going to be coming out. And I think a lot of our early thinking on what Circle can do and does do is going to change a lot throughout the year, because I think the meta's going to cycle. Right now we're in a place where medium-based infantry is very strong. There's a lot of healing that's out there. There's a lot of need for anti-healing. And the as things evolve to handle that, we're going to have to evolve to handle those things. I think right now people are a little bit like down on things like Bloodweavers because they seem like they're just bad Ravagers, but they have grievous wounds on their like stab, right? Super strong right now. Like, look at how much stuff focuses on healing, and it's amazingly strong. I think we also need some time for some of our warlocks to, like, for people to really start exploring outside the box. Right now it's kind of like, well, I own a super powerful, and I'm looking at another or I'm looking at a few other Devour Source casters like Morfana 1, Baldur 1, Wormwood, etc. But that's all like kind of neatly in a box. And then there's a lot of thought that like Call of the Wild isn't that good. And I think that's crazy personally, but that's sort of the sentiment. And there's a lot of like, well, Kruger 2 is still the strongest thing in the army with bones, blah blah blah, whatever. You've heard almost no talking about Bradigus, but like you could certainly build like your Tharn list to sort of be your all-comers that doesn't really crack armor and back it up with a Bradigus list, but nobody's like doing that. Or no, I haven't seen anybody talking about it anyways. We have Secret Masters in Champions, and like nobody knows what to do with that theme. So many people think that Druids of Orboros are just really bad. I don't think that they've really focused on I don't think many people have really focused on like a combination of them and minions and etc. etc. Also related, a couple questions. When I do see the shrine, how often does it die? My experience with the Shrine was that it never died. I think I played it with... I only played it in CID, so there's that. I played it with Kruger 2 once or twice. Didn't die, but it was back pretty far, and he has Windstorm. I played it with Iona, I think, and I think Morvana 1, and it did not die in either of those games either. The games with Iona, I think, were reasonably quick. The game with Morvana 1, I don't remember much about. But I think... I think it's going to die a similar number of times that like the Fulcrum would die, right? Like if you put it in a list where you can protect it or you can keep the right things in front of it, I think it's going to be fine. And it's going to be back farther than a Fulcrum a lot of times. So like, I don't see it dying that often. I mean, I think if you don't get your solo you want out fast, reasonably fast. Good point. Anyways, I'll finish that thought. If you don't get your solo out, I think people will focus it. And I think once you do, they'll probably have other things they need to deal with. When I see the Shrine, how often does I see it? The question was actually meant to be the Shrine of the Lawgiver. I kill it in most of the games I play. Except for 5 Brenos, in which case you can just shoot it with his spell and turn it off. And then you just have to worry about the recursion. But generally speaking, I have turned it off because I don't want to deal with the recursion. And I don't want to deal with the RFP because I've been playing... I think I played Morvana 1 recently into it, so the RFP was a problem. The anti-stealth is a problem. Like, it's really hard to keep Bridget alive and stuff. So I think the Shrine can definitely be killed, right? It also has the unfortunate circumstance of being in Protectorate. So if you like come against Protectorate with a bunch of guns, and the first thing a good Protector player is going to do is like use his choir to turn off the ability to shoot their jacks, but then what are you going to do with all your guns? You're going to shoot the Shrine. Most of the games I've seen it's died. I don't know that means that most of the games it's played in that it dies, but yeah. Let's see. Tharn can't play into Crucible Guard because of Withering Humor. I don't necessarily agree there, although that is something that we definitely have to be concerned about. For me, it's the sprays that are actually concerning. It's obviously really annoying to turn off our healing because we rely on it a lot, but they usually only have 1 or 2 of those. And depends on the caster, we should be able to do enough work into it. I've played Tharn. I played Tharn. Actually, most of this was pre-CID, but I've played Tharn with into both Silvestro and Locke, and I felt super in control of both those matchups. I played Tharn with Kruger 1 pre-CID into Locke, and I tabled her. So it did not have a Vulcan. That probably would change the situation a bit. But in general, I need to play more games into more like late release Crucible Guard. My general thought is that Crucible Guard is not does not have high enough defensive values, and I think we have the ability to have enough of our army survive that we will end up winning in the long run. Because a lot of Crucible Guard is built around making sure you have some pretty big turns or focusing your forces in a particular area. That said, I do need to play it more because I do have a lot of concerns about just the volume of sprays and things. Comment about Baldur 1 eats Crucible Guard. Stopping the blast damage is really big for sure. Def 18 Rocket Man is going to give you issues. That's true, unless you have a Thunderbird. Yeah. We haven't talked about Storm Raptor. That guy, I don't know where we're really going to finally see it, but it feels so good that model is so good now. I may or may not be playing one at ATC. We'll see. Plan is kind of yes at the moment. My local Crucible Guard player brings Vulcan with Locke and Lucas with Dude Spam. Both of those are rough. Do you encounter Rocket Man? So the game I mentioned, my opponent did not want to drop that into Kruger 1 because obvious those Rocket Men are all just dead. Do I not encounter Rocket Men? I think this gets us into one of those places where we're going to start seeing which versions of Tharn are the strongest. Because stuff like that, Iona's actually super weak to, right? Like, she does not want to play in, like, Rocket Men actually are a problem for Iona. That said, like, your Ravagers do have a corpse, so the fact that you can boost and you can hit on an 11 or 9, depending on which mode they pick, is pretty strong. Might be one of the few times that I actually spin up the Chain Lightning on my Shaman and try to get it in there. But it is one of those things where I think people are undervaluing some of the other Tharn that aren't Ravagers, right? You know, right now it's kind of like put double Ravagers in your list, GG, right? But like, you know, we start looking at Bloodweavers, which get Gang and Divine Inspiration, and suddenly you've got a chance of hitting those models. And you've got the cute thing that happens where the blast... Oh, they're immune. Depends on if they're immune to blast damage or not, but I don't remember which order does which. You've got that, right? You've got, you know, like, blood trackers with mortality and prey now are at a reasonable chance to actually hit you with their ranged attacks or their melee attacks. You've got... what else do we have that... Morvana 2 has a spell that helps with accuracy, right? Like, a lot of people, are, myself included, are playing Iona because right now the rerolls are... the rerolls are super strong. And usually enough to, like, make that, like, accuracy good enough, but it's not always enough, and, like, that's where I think we're going to see some evolution in what's played. You can use things like Wolf Riders and get behind them, at which point you're going to get enough, you know, you can hopefully get enough attacks into them to do what you need to do. Even then, though, I guess, like, you still need 10s. No, you need 9s in the back. Reroll 9s, meh, not very great. You've got Lord of the Feast, who can get behind them, maybe, depending on placement. He's going to have a hard time hitting the bird, but... you know, again, and like being able to, he just needs to be able to boost the hit, which you can do. So, it's workable. I mean, I do think high def Rocket Men are an issue, but then yeah, you have to be like, well, is he gonna play a Storm Raptor or not? Or even just something like Chromac 2, where like you can cast, like, you've got a Getorix with Murderous and Overtake, and you've got Stalkers that get up to Med 8. And yeah, Lord of the Feast can get Divine Inspiration. We haven't talked about, like, Grail with Lord of the Feast, right? You put Divine Inspiration and Storm Rager on that guy, and then, like, have fun, Rocket Men. Or you've got your, like, Death Marched Blood Trackers or Death Wolves or something. There's a lot of interesting things, but it is one of the places where I think that we're gonna see an evolution, and then also let's not forget, like, some people are playing Devourer's Host with Wormwood, and if you do that, now you just Hellmouth and kill all of them because it's not blast damage. Yeah. So, anyways, there's options there. What was the other thing? Secret Masters is super interesting. It's super interesting to me, too. Here's my meh about it, and then I'll talk about what I think is neat. The meh about it is we kind of, like, went into this edition, and I feel really fuzzy. We went into this edition with all of the, like, stuff being friendly faction and the focus being on faction, and, like, Secret Masters has, like, 2 units in it, basically, and then, like, 2 huge bases, and that's the stuff that is, like, unique to it. And Circle has never really been a faction that overly focused on minions, and now we have this theme that is, like, super deep on minions that we need to play. And I own enough to do it. Like, that's not the issue. And I'm fine, you know, fine. I'll pick up things slowly if I don't. But, like, it's weird to me that this is suddenly a thing. And it feels like it's sort of like ham-fistedly a thing because somebody decided that druids needed to have a separate theme. Like, if I were able to rewind the clock and do the themes myself, we would have, all we would have done was we would have gotten Call of the Wild. We would add Druids of Orboros, and Mist Riders to that theme, possibly, and possibly the Fulcrum. Even if none of that stuff counted for points, we already have the Well, so, like, possibly the Fulcrum. We would have added that stuff to Secret Masters. I'm sorry, to Call of the Wild. We would have added Druids and Mist Riders to Bones, and we would have called it a day. We'd have 4 themes. We'd have Druids in the ones that I think thematically make sense to have Druids in. We would have, and then they could play a support role instead of now where they're playing a support role, but like to minions who are like supporting them, and it's just very weird. So, but we live in the world we live in, and so we've got these. We've got this Secret Masters list, and it's like trying to unlock what works there is difficult, right? It's one of the places. I do have a Morvana 1 list I'm going to attempt to test as a preview, and if anybody plays this, I would love to know what you found. But it's Morvana 1. This might be kind of where I'm gonna have a little wrap up after I throw this list out there because it's been over an hour actually. But it's Morvana 1, Brenos, 2 Woldweirds, 2 units of Druids of Orboros, both with the command attachments. Actually, I'm gonna make this list on Conflict Chamber to make sure that I don't miss. So we're doing it live. I have made it before. I don't have it up in front of me to make sure that I'm getting all the points right. But anyways, it's Morvana 1 with Brenos, Secret Masters. Yep. So we got Brenos, 2 Woldweirds. There's Woldweird. Okay. Then we have 2 units of Druids of Orboros, both with Overseers. And then we have, for our minion units, we're going to have 2 units of Pharaoh Slaughterhousers, 1 unit of Pharaoh Valkyries, and a Gatorman Boker and Swamp Shamblers. And then there's 6 points left. How did I use those up? Probably need solos. And I have 1 more free solo as well. Did I go with a Wilder? 2 Blackclads maybe? 2 Wayfarers? And a Gallus Grove. Yeah, I'm not 100% that was where my loadout of solos went to, but it's close enough. You could probably go, yeah, you might have Shifting Stones in there. I might use those 6 points for 2 units of Shifting Stones. A lot for this list. The list also needed solos pretty badly. Actually, the solo, so those last few points would probably be some tech pieces, but because there's actually some things that are really interesting, like Bog Trog Trawlers or Gatorman Husks with Ambush. They can be pretty strong. Efreet Scouts are another strong option, but I only really like them if I get 2. You could go with Gremlin Swarms actually as well. Yeah, you could go double Brigands as well, a little more range focus. You could also go in the direction of Croak Raiders, and you could also go with like I said, the Efreet Scouts are another very interesting option. They're real hard to pin down. And there was one more that I theorized up. You could also look into some of like the lesser war beasts and stuff, although I think that's more of a Circle thing, or Kruger 2 thing. Anyways, so if anybody gets a chance to try this list, but this is roughly speaking like a testing place for me. So the idea here, you get guns from things like the Valkyries, the Druids obviously have their spells. You get your Woldbeards. The Woldbeards are there to trigger. You have the access to triggering your feet. You've got some anti-upkeep, of course. You so that gives you like the ranged RFP. You have Brennos for an arc node. You've got a Gallows Grove for an arc node. You've got a couple solos. Druids are just super frustrating to kill. And one of them is going to have regrowth, so like you kind of put them forward to do their thing, and if they die, they turn into corpses. Your Shamblers pick up. Your Valkyries can keep your Boker alive, and they can shield guard for anything else. If you need to, you use the Shamblers to keep your Druids alive. Like it's a big knot to untie, and it's kind of got tools to do everything. But of course, yeah, you could switch around to a little bit more range focus. The knockdown spell on the Druids is really good for that. Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things. There's probably something from Kruger 2 in this also that could be tested. Tanith is the other warlock. I mean, this makes sense to look at these three because they're in ADR. But Tanith is also really interesting because none of her stuff super cares about faction. Like, Affliction doesn't matter. Admonitions are battle group anyways. Scything Touch has to go on a solo, but you can put that like in a Black Cloud Wafer and it can get kind of anywhere. So, kind of something I'm taking a look at. I do think theoretically like a Storm Raptor could be interesting with her and some other stuff, but yeah, I don't feel like super confident in this, but it's one of the things I'm gonna give a go at. So, but if anybody tries something like this, I would certainly love to hear what your findings are. Anyways, I'm gonna start kind of wrapping this up. It's gone probably longer than I anticipated, but it's been enjoyable to kind of talk about these things and have. Wasn't very many people in the chat, but those that were there, I really appreciated. So just as a wrap up, as I look into 2019, I'm really excited to get some more games in with Circle, to try some new things with Tharn. I may start doing some more. Might just be trying some stuff, right? Like I kind of have like the call to play some Grail. I kind of want to go back to testing out Morvana 1 a little bit in Tharn. I want to test the Secret Masters version in Tharn, or with Morvana 1. I want to give the Baldur 1 list with all the Lady Tharn another go. I would like to... There's another one. I played one game with Wormwood. I might do more of that. I don't know. But then also too, like I want to just I've not gotten in as much Judgment as I would like, and I would really like to be looking to do more of that. Hopefully, I know we probably could have played a game in the amount of time that I've spent talking about this, but hopefully I get a chance to do some Vassal Judgment, because I think it's a much easier way to do that than other larger games. That give me a few more games. My wife actually likes Judgment, so hopefully we can have some free time to play a game or two. Hopefully she can get involved in playing some games. Right now I know she's really excited to be painting those models because they are amazing. And you know, hopefully she gets a chance to show that off. GriffInsRootsPainting.com if you are familiar. Yep. Richard in the chat has offered to play some Vassals, so probably not tonight. It's already 9:30 for me, and I probably should still take my doggo for a short walk. I don't think she's on camera anymore. No, she's probably on the couch. So yeah, anyways, thanks for those of you who joined me in the chat. It's been a lot of fun. For those of you who are watching this later on YouTube, if you know, as always, I love to get in and talk about list ideas, game ideas, Judgment, War Machine, Circle. I also have some video game stuff I'm exploring. I may still play a little Heroes of the Storm here and there. I'm checking out Dota 2 a little bit. And Warcraft 3 actually has been a thing that I'm sort of looking at. I didn't actually play it really the first time around, and I think it's a super cool game. Watch a lot of streams. And the Reforged is coming out later this year, so I've been like sort of dabbling in that, but I may get into that a little bit more. If people are interested in more of my like video game exploits, let me know, because I would be more than happy to discuss more of that or possibly show some of that off. Especially if I get a new computer. My laptop probably can't support. I could probably stream a Warcraft 3 game, and that's probably about it. But yeah, if anybody has any interest in that, let me know. Anyways, thanks for those who joined on the chat. Thanks for those who watch this later. Hit me up on social media. The links should be below. There's my Discord. There's the Judgment Discord. I have a Facebook group. I have my own Discord. I have Twitter, Messenger, wherever you want to. We can talk. We can talk about whatever. And happy holidays to all of you, and we'll see you in the new year.